Man, Pablo Escobar ain't got nothing on this dude. That's right. We talking about the king of Picayune, Mississippi. Tell me, Pablo Escobar, see, he was smuggling hippopotamuses. He couldn't figure out to make, the local wildlife that was in Central America work for his needs. So instead, of course he had, hundreds of millions of dollars. He had them hippopotamuses from Africa smuggled in. And he had them along with lions, hyenas, probably alligators. He had tigers or whatever else. Pablo Escobar was a madman. But the king of Mississippi, Ryan Howard, that I just saw on the news, he had 8 alligators. And he ain't no Pablo Escobar. He just one of them country boys from Mississippi, from South Louisiana, who's probably growing his own marijuana, probably has illegal pets. I met dudes who got illegal pets in Louisiana. The Louisiana convicts and Louisiana gangsters are different than the West Coast and the East Coast. You hear a lot of stuff. You got your New Yorkers, you got your Maryland stuff, you got your down there in Virginia, all that area. I know Virginia's considered the South, but they prisons are more run like East Coast prisons. I'm talking about deep South, Mississippi, Louisiana. You know what I mean? The prisoners and the convicts are just different. We operate on our own structure. We ain't on that political stuff like they got in the West Coast and the feds. It's just a different ball game in Louisiana. And so my man had his 8 alligators, right? It was protecting his illegal marijuana stash. Like I said, he was like Pablo Escobar, except he was the king of Picayune, Mississippi. He was doing some gangster stuff. Now, I want to ask you a question. Would you break into a home if you knew, in fact, that there was 8 alligators in there? You don't want to go in somebody's yard when they got 1 German Shepherd in the yard. Now, when dudes got 8 and 9 pit bulls chained up, you know what I mean? And those pit bulls are aggressively trained to attack people. You don't want to go in their yard. So you're going to go in the yard where dude got 8 alligators? And he ain't fed the alligators because he's too busy being stupid, slanging and banging. Yeah, you ain't going to go in that yard. You don't know what he got in that house. 7-8 foot alligator, you add 8 of them to the mix, man, they'll do you damage. I don't know how big these alligators were, but I remember growing up on the West Bank of New Orleans. I personally remember when I was a teenager, and I'm going back, I was even younger to even understand when I was first starting to be introduced to all this crazy stuff that goes on in life. I remember being about 12, 13 years old in my neighborhood wandering. We used to play after the street lights came on, play football on the street. We'd go on the levee. We used to, at 12 and 13 years old, we'd have 12 gauges. We'd have 22 rifles, and we'd be in the woods all day long shooting at everything we could. Squirrels, rabbits, you know what I mean? Raccoons, we didn't care. We would. That's what we were doing. Even shooting alligators, catching snakes, shooting mortar moccasins. So we'd be out all night in the woods, in the bayou, with our little rifles and our little shotguns. But I remember they had some older dudes who lived in the neighborhood, and they were kind of cool with the kids, that were younger, because they had some Rottweilers. And I remember they used to have activity at their house all hours of the day, all hours of the night. Well, talking to them a few times, coming to find out, they were selling that, they had that marijuana. Listen, that's all I knew weed when I was young. So I knew these dudes had the weed in the neighborhood, right? I knew they had the marijuana. But, looking back, they probably had more than marijuana. Like I said, I was 11, 12, 13 years old, around that time, maybe all the way into 14 years old. I knew these dudes. But I remember they had Rottweilers, and they trained the Rottweilers. You couldn't touch them. You couldn't go back there. And I remember looking back, I think they were cruel people, because they used to catch neighborhood cats or get cats, and they would throw the cats in the backyard and let the Rottweilers kill them. They would let the Rottweilers eat the cats. That's how they would feed them. And I thought, looking back then, my friends thought it was funny, but I honestly, even then, I didn't think it was funny. I always loved animals, So I thought to do that to the cat was cruel, and they used to do cruel stuff like that. But anyway, the Rottweilers, you couldn't get near that gate because they would slobber and vicious at the mouth. And I remember that thinking, man, ain't nobody gonna go by them people's house, even as a kid, because I was kind of like, man, them dogs are mean. Because I had my little, we had our little rifles with us, but these dudes were slanging, these were some white dudes, and they were slanging back then. And I don't even remember their names. They were older. They had to be, like I said, if I was 13 years old, these dudes were at least a decade older than me, maybe a little bit older than that, And so they were doing their thing, and I don't know whatever happened to them, but I do remember them having the dogs to protect their illegal narcotic stash. And then today, or should I say yesterday, we hear about a guy called the Picayune King of Mississippi who got 8 alligators that he's using to protect his stash. So what I'm saying is it's not uncommon in the South to have people use some unorthodox ways to protect their illegal stash. Pablo Escobar was giving people to his tigers and his lions and his hyenas or whatever he had. I know he was feeding people to predators, right? African predator cats. That's what he was doing. And so, or Southeast Asian tigers. So he was doing that thing. But in Louisiana, you got bobcats, you got brown bear, but it's hard to get, you mess with a brown bear, that's not a smart thing to do. Even if you into that type of stuff, because if you get caught messing with a brown bear, man, you're going to have wildlife fisheries, feds, you're going to have state government, you're going to have all the news channels. So you ain't going to do that stupid, right? Bobcat ain't enough to stop nobody from taking your stash. But 8 alligators at about 7 and 8 foot apiece, you ain't messing with that stash. That's some different type of bayou gangster stuff that y'all not doing on the West Coast. Y'all still got pit bulls, right? I know it. Y'all got German shepherds and pit bulls. They got that down here too. Dudes putting razor blades on chickens' feet. Dude putting razor blades on chicken feet, and that's how they doing. That's what they call like cockfighting, right? And so they do that chicken fighting. I think they finally outlawed it here in Louisiana, but for a long time when I was growing up, it was pit bull fights and cockfight. That's what dude talked about, going to the chicken fights. You know what I mean? I'm from the West Bank, like I said, deep in the bayou. So that's the type of stuff they do. My cousin's dad, he was doing all that stuff, fighting those animals. I remember him used to tell me about it. My dad used to tell me about it. I was his friend. But, so using unorthodox methods like animals to protect the drug stash is something that people been doing a long time. But when you hear about it and you see about it, it's worth talking about, So I just think about these things back, when I was growing up. And that brings me to another thing, So we know that the West Coast, there's a lot of prison and crime channels on the West Coast. And there's a lot on the East Coast, and it's just different. But we don't have a lot of consistent. They have some in the South. They do. I have name dropping no channels nowhere. But they got some in the South. But you ain't hearing like a lot of white dudes really talk about, how it is in the South. It's a different ball game doing time in the South and being, a white dude from the South, especially Louisiana. Louisiana's operating on different standards than California. Like I said, California's big. The white boys, they got the numbers out there, and so they're holding a little something down. But here in Louisiana, man, it's just a different story. It don't structure like that. It's like I said, it's lone wolf. You got to stand on your own 2 feet. Now, if you stand on your own 2 feet, then the rest of the white dudes are gonna rock with you. They're gonna roll with you. They ain't gonna let you just get handled. You know what I mean? So if you a wolf and you willing to, or you a lone wolf and you willing to fight like a lone wolf, yeah, you gonna build your pack. It might be 3, 4, 5 of y'all. You gonna stand out and stand up. So it's different because you always hear people talking about, I don't know what. Look, in Alabama, I don't know. It's bad in Alabama. I did my time in Louisiana. In Louisiana, the white dudes I know, they've been outnumbered and beat. But at least a lot of the dudes who I come up with, man, they going to stand up and stand out and fight for themselves, to get win, lose, or draw. I lost almost all my fights, but I still handled my business. And my people got down with me. And they going to get down, in Louisiana. That's just the way it is. It's a different thing in Louisiana than it is on the West Coast prisons. So as I talk about this, I want to uncover this thing because I think it's time to get an understanding on how Louisiana prisons are much different than other prisons. You already know that Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate. Now, maybe Mississippi recently passed us up, and, Louisiana, there was no doubt. Everybody knew Louisiana was one of the most brutal prison systems. Angola, I ain't never been there. I ain't never been to the pen. You know what I mean? But I know enough people who've been to the pen, and I know people, in and out of it, you know what I mean? But all the prisons in Louisiana, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they were just brutal. You go into one of the satellite camps, like the Quincy or something, you know what I mean? Dude, you was going down the walk with your bag, and you were just getting jacked. And that ain't even counting the parish jails. You rather do time in the state prison than you would have did in Jefferson or Orleans Parish, especially Orleans Parish, Baton Rouge or Shreveport. It was brutal in them parish jails. You know what I mean? You get in them tears, man. Them guards walk away from the key. It's the wild, wild west. It's a different ball game. And so to be a white dude, you had to stand on your business and fight. You know what I mean? So white dudes stood up. And look, and that's another thing. A lot of dudes from California, not dudes from the South, think they're trying to be black. Ain't nobody trying to be nothing. You know what I mean? Dudes just as the way they are. That's just it. That's like they ain't no respect. We can respect one another. I respect the way California operates. I like what the white dudes got going down there. I mean, they stood up for themselves. You know what I mean? I don't agree with all of it, and I get the point that you want to defend, to defend each other. But we do the same thing down here. But we don't program like that, man. You can still get down with another race down here. You know what I mean? You got to be careful. You know, black dude thinks they're going to play any young white dude because they looking to victimize them, you know, in general. Not all black dudes. You know what I mean? But the ones who are looking for a victim, they're usually looking for a little white dude to victimize, you know? Whether they want to take his booty or take his canteen, you know, or try to take his old lady. They try to do everything. They're looking just for a weak link. But if you stand up and handle your business and bust him in his mouth, handle your business, man, his people ain't going to ride with him neither. They're like, man, white boy whoop you. That's on you. You shouldn't have been messing with that dude booty. You know what I mean? Shoot, white dude might take his booty. I've seen that here too. I've seen all kind of crazy stuff happen. Inside out the ordinary. You know what I mean? So how we go from alligators to booties? Because I'm just ranting and talking and I'm trying to get this content out there so I could build up this channel, The Pen and the Shank, which I really think you need to give me a like and subscribe and tune into this channel because I'm going to give you my authentic self. And my authentic self is like my mind goes from here to there to here to there. But I'm being authentic and I'm telling you the true stories. You know, I'm not going to say the things other than what they really are or my opinion. And when it comes to crime and prison-related content in the South, I have a good understanding of it. And I'm telling you, it's different and it's worth hearing about. You know, you always hear about the feds and the California prison system. You don't hear a lot about Louisiana. There's not a lot of content on Louisiana prison systems and Mississippi prison systems. Lately, Alabama has risen to the top because Alabama, honestly, in the whole country, I ain't disputing. Alabama is the most brutal prison system. And if you're a white dude and you remotely terrified, you done. They're going to eat you. They eat you up, spit you out, and they might just unalive you or brutally take your manhood every single day that you're in there. You got to be a savage. You know, so I know there's white dudes handling business, no doubt about it. But the odds are stacked against them, you know. So they got to figure that out, though, in that system. They got to figure it out. You know, they get about, you know, they send out orders. They all wake up on the same day one day and say, look, win, lose, or draw, life or death. Today's the day. We're going to make people fear. And it could happen. Anything could happen. Any human could get got at any time, right? The prison system is brutal. That's why it's not worth playing that game. You know, it's not worth. It's time to motivate yourself to do better. You got to get outside of that mentality to where you got to prove out and show up, especially if you in your 30s, late 30s, 40s, and especially 50s and 60s. It's over. Some dudes still trying to play that game. And they wonder why their life passes them by and they get put in a cemetery or thrown in a ditch with their ashes and they never lived up to their full potential. We all have potential, but we have to be willing to deal with our issues in a correct course. And you know what? The past, you don't have to hide from your past. I've learned that. Own up to it. It's part of who you became today. It's the lessons you learned in your past. It's the lessons I learned from almost 10 years I've done in prison that I had to learn. It's the lessons I did when I was a young man ripping and running the streets. It's the lessons I learned from being married on what marriage takes. You know what I mean? You're not going to be a good worker and a good employee unless you put in work and you learn what that is, to be faithful to something like a job or a wife. You know what I mean? Or staying out of prison or having 8 alligators. Whatever it takes, man. Thanks for watching the Pen and the Shank vlog, and give me a like and subscribe, and please go check out my other videos. This one was just a tangent that I went here, there, and everywhere. You know what? Comment and say what you think about it. You know, chime in. All right, let's get it.